We're tackling baby food pouches this time, but not the food itself. We're going deeper, right into the packaging.
Sounds interesting.
You guys had some really great questions about what might be hiding in those layers, and let me tell you, it gets surprisingly complex. We're digging into two brand new research articles, all about the science of chemical migration.
Chemical migration.
Basically, how stuff from the packaging can actually end up in the food itself.
Huh. You'd think with how popular those pouches are growing almost 9% every year, we'd have this all figured out by now.
You'd think so, right?
Hmm.
But turns out that convenience comes with some pretty big questions about potential chemicals, which is exactly what these studies are looking at.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Let's start with the pouches themselves. They seem pretty basic, but like most things, there's more than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking multi-layered constructions here.
Layers, like an onion.
Kind of. A lot of them use this petal-P combo, so that's polyethylene, terephthalate, PET, aluminum, and then polyethylene again.
Peat, aluminum, polyethylene. It's like a chemistry sandwich.
I like that, and each layer has a specific job to do.
Okay, so break it down for us. What's the deal with all those layers?
It's all about protection. That outer layer, the PET, that's your tough guy, providing structure, strength.
Makes sense. Got to hold all that goodness in.
Exactly. Then you've got the aluminum, that's the bodyguard, keeps out the light and oxygen that could spoil the food.
Okay, important job.
And finally, that inner layer of polyethylene, that's the food's best friend.
How so?
It creates a barrier to prevent the aluminum from coming into contact with what your little one's eating.
Ah, so it's like a safety net for the food itself.
You got it.
Okay, so we've got our layers all figured out. But then there's this whole migration thing, right? Like, how do we know things from those layers don't actually end up in the food?
It's a really valid concern, and it's good you brought it up because that's exactly what the researchers looked at. They used the term migration to describe how chemicals can move from the packaging materials into the food.
So they don't just stay put in their designated layers.
Unfortunately not. And
Yeah.
here's where it gets interesting. There are regulations in place, like this European Union Law Regulation 1/2011, specifically designed to limit this migration and keep things safe.
Regulations, okay, that's somewhat reassuring at least.
Right.
So it's not just a free-for-all where anything goes when it comes to packaging. But how do they even keep track of all these chemicals? It's not like they're listed on the ingredients list.
Exactly. And that's where the research gets really, really granular. They're looking at both what they call intentionally added substances,
Hmm.
the IAS, preservatives, colors, things added on purpose, and then there are the non-intentionally added substances, or NIAS.
And nice. So that's where things get a little shady.
A bit. Those are the surprise guests at the party, the ones who showed up even though they weren't on the guest list.
I see.
They could be impurities in the materials, byproducts from manufacturing, or even things that are formed as the packaging breaks down over time. And unlike their intentional counterparts, we know a lot less about their potential effects.
Okay, so we've got these NIS, these mystery chemicals potentially hanging out in our food. I'm already starting to eye my pantry a little differently.
Interesting stuff, right?
It is. But what did these researchers actually find in these pouches?
Well, get ready for a familiar name because they found BPA in a lot of the pouches they tested, even some that were labeled BPA-free.
Wait, really? So much for trusting labels. But seriously, what's the big deal with BPA again? It's not like I'm feeding my kid plastic, right?
No, it's not that straightforward.
Right.
But BPA has been linked to endocrine disruption.
Endocrine disruption.
Yeah.
In plain English.
It can mess with hormones. And we all know how crucial those are, especially in those early years. Those hormones are super important for growth and development. And it's not just BPA either.
Oh, there's more.
They found BPS in some of the pouches, which is often touted as that safer alternative.
Right.
But there are concerns it might actually have similar effects to BPA.
So even when we're trying to choose the better option, we're still kind of playing chemical roulette.
That's a good way to put it.
Are there any other, like, usual suspects they found in there?
They also found phthalates in many of the pouches. You know how some plastics have that bendy, flexible quality?
Yeah.
Phthalates are often added to plastics to achieve that, but they've also been linked to developmental issues in infants and children.
Okay, I see. That's definitely making me think twice about grabbing those pouches for a quick and easy meal. And it's a good reminder that these chemicals aren't just a baby food problem.
Right.
They're everywhere in food packaging.
Absolutely.
This research is relevant even if you're long past the puree stage of life.
Huh.
But let's get back to those NIS for a second. Finding BPA is one thing, but these are like the unknowns, right? What did the researchers uncover about those?
That's where things get really, really interesting. They found a whole mix of NIS in these pouches, and get this. Some of them had never even been detected before in any food packaging, ever.
Wow, chemicals never seen before. What are the implications of that? Is there any way to even know what we're dealing with here?
It's definitely uncharted territory. Some of the things they found were things like AADEG, which stands for adipic acid diethylene glycol.
Okay.
And then there's NPGA, short for neopentyl glycol adipic acid.
Catchy.
I know, right? And then get this, one of the NIAs they found, NPGPA, HDPA, it's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
It was actually identified in these pouches for the very first time.
Wow.
Like we'd never seen it before.
Okay, now I really feel like I need a chemistry degree to understand all of this.
Yeah.
But seriously, with these NIAs, what's the biggest challenge in figuring out if they actually pose a risk?
That is the million-dollar question. One of the biggest hurdles is simply identifying them. There's no master list of every single NIS out there, and their composition can be incredibly complex.
I bet.
Researchers are often working with very limited information and tools, and even if they can identify them, there's the issue of long-term effects.
Right.
We simply don't have decades of data on a lot of these substances. And we don't fully understand their impact on human health, especially at such young ages. It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but we don't have all the pieces. And on top of that, we're not even sure what the picture's supposed to look like.
It's like a puzzle, but way more complicated.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here? What can we actually do with this information?
It can feel overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
But knowledge is power. We're not aiming to scare anyone here.
No, of course not.
Just to give you all the information you need to make choices that feel right for you and your family.
So where do we go from here? What can we actually do with this information?
It can feel overwhelming, right? But knowledge is power. We're not aiming to scare anyone here. Just to give you all the information you need to make choices that feel right for you and your family.
So what can our listeners do? Give us the concrete steps to take away from all of this.
First things first, don't panic. Just because these chemicals are present doesn't mean they're causing immediate harm. Remember, these studies are raising awareness and highlighting areas where we need to investigate further. But there are definitely things you can do to minimize any potential risks. Start with those labels. You might not see NIs listed specifically, but look for things like BPA-free.
So it's like being a detective in the grocery store aisle.
You said it. And don't just stop at labels. Think about diversifying those food choices. Pouches are convenient, no argument there, but maybe mix it up with some homemade baby food, jars, even those refillable pouches you can use with your own purees.
That reminds me, when my kids were little, I did a mix of everything, pouches, jars, homemade. It was all about balance and what worked for us at the time.
Exactly. And don't underestimate your power as a consumer. If you're concerned about something, reach out to the brands you buy. Ask about their packaging, their manufacturing processes, their stance on chemical migration. You have a voice, use it.
So it's about staying informed, making conscious choices, and advocating for transparency from the companies who are creating these products.
Absolutely. And here's a final thought for you to chew on. This research reminds us that science is an ongoing process.
Always learning.
We're constantly learning more about these chemicals and their potential impact. The regulations surrounding NIS are evolving all the time, and by staying informed, you can actually be a part of that conversation pushing for safer products for everyone.
Such an important reminder. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's definitely given us a lot to think about. And to our listeners, we want to hear from you. What steps are you taking to make informed choices about food packaging? Have you found any awesome alternatives to baby food pouches? Share your thoughts, tips, and experiences on our website. Until next time, keep those brains curious and those pantries stocked with knowledge.
Learn more at mommyhood101.com.